This is a reminder, this is a PG-13 sermon. Just putting that out there. Don't want to get the emails. Here we go. In ancient Greek mythology, people that traveled to Athens before they came into the city were placed on a bed, Procrustes' bed, and they wanted to make sure that you conformed. So what happened was, on Procrustes' bed, if you were too short, they would take a vice and then pull your body apart. And then if you were too tall, that they would squeeze you and lop off body parts. Essentially, the metaphor then is if you're going to become an Athenian, you're going to be exactly like the people who are already there. Every Christian man I know at some point feels like the church is Procrustes' bed. Before you come in, you're being squeezed into this effeminate image of what Christianity should be. The way the music is, the way the language is, the way the dress is, the way the topics are. And what is needed is a return to conducting church where it allows biblically based models for both men and women to thrive. The result of an effeminate version of Christianity that essentially it's why I almost didn't want to be a pastor. I was like, it's so embarrassing. It is the result of, do you know that Islam is now the fastest growing religion in the world? It's now surpassing Christianity. Question, why is that? Number one, they take evangelism seriously. Every single church planting movement that we've helped start around the world has been racing with proponents of Islam to get there first. Every single time we're going into these unreached places. We also have Muslims that are there that we're competing with. So it's evangelism, but it's also because they appeal to men. Now, their version of masculinity is grotesque, it is evil, and it's demeaning, but it appeals to some men. According to Lifeway Research Group, if the mother is the first person to become a Christian in a family, there's a 17% probability that everyone in the household will follow. However, when the father is the first person to convert to Christianity, it's a 93% probability that everybody in the house will follow. See the difference? It doesn't demean the influence of the spiritual leadership of women, because who are the spiritual leaders across this country and churches? Hands down, it's women. Hands down, it's women. We're not debating that. In another report in Touchstone magazine, in homes where both parents attended church regularly, 33% of their children ended up as regular churchgoers, and 41% ended up attending irregularly, 4 to 6 times a month, something like that. But notice this. So it means that both parents, if they attend church regularly, your kids are going to follow. It's going to have a mark. It's going to have an influence. But notice this, and this is important for those of you who are single dads. If the father attends regularly and the mother doesn't, 44% of children will be regular church attenders. That's 10% more than if both parents go. That ought to tell you the power of a Christian, godly, single man. We're continuing our series called Summer Soundtrack. And we've been talking about the Psalms in the Old Testament and how there's sort of this irreverent playbook that wouldn't be played on K-Love today. The themes that it talks about just simply wouldn't be allowed on K-Love. Why? Procrustes' bed. And it's the reason most Psalms aren't taught in churches. Why? Procrustes' bed. But Psalm chapter 1, which we're going to look at today, answers this whole men in the church question. And it starts this way. Blessed is the one, and I want you to notice up there, I don't have a screen because of all the stuff we have here. Blessed is the one, it's the Hebrew word ish. In other words, the NIV translator, they wanted to be nice and help everybody feel included, but Psalm 1 is a psalm for men. It is the psalm specifically for men. Why? Because you and I know, well, I love it when I see men here do this. Love it. Thank you, Kirk. I'm looking around. Here we go. All right. Why? Because I know they're the resistant. Can't fool your body language. It's not too cold in here. Suck it up. Resistance, right? And so I really love it when men do this and then they eventually walk out like it's a bad movie. Why is that? Because you and I both know the men that are here today, by and large, you wish you could be golfing right now. You wish that you could be doing something other than being here, because by and large, men view the church as being irrelevant to their lives. I am going to go to work. Even if you do work full time, I'm going to go to work, and that's where my real action is happening. Everything else is sort of following under the wife. That includes the home, parenting, children, everything else that has any form of responsibility, and that includes church. So the reason this psalm specifically addresses men is why? Because it wants to be a signal to the men that what you're about to read in Psalm chapter 2 all the way through 150 is very relevant to your lives. It's very, very raw, and it's very dangerous. Proceed with caution. So it says, blessed is each man who does not walk in step with the wicked or stand in the way that sinners take or sit in the company of mockers. But his delight is in the law. In other words, I've got a group of people around me. They're walking, they're sitting and standing. Every aspect of my life, I'm surrounded by people, and I have a choice. I can let my life be guided by the person that created me. In the Torah, it says, blessed is the person that murmurs. You see this? If you go to Israel, right, you're at the Wailing Wall, and you see these men that are they're basically speaking Hebrew, right? And they're babbling, they're murmuring. What you hear is you don't hear it. And what they're doing is they're reciting the law. This is the very first psalm I memorized. Blessed is the man who walks not on the counsel of the wicked, but stands in the way of sinners, sees in the seat of the mockers. His delight is in the law, and law is law. His meditates day and night. He's like a tree that's planted by streams of living water, which yields its fruit in season. Whatever that man does prosper, not so the wicked. So it sounds like murmuring, but what I'm doing is I'm reciting God's word to myself. I'm reminding. And so the situation is, and I'm going to tell you something that's going to make you all very uncomfortable, but that's okay. You need to understand what the psalm is talking about. There is going to come a time when your young boy is in a very difficult situation, and he has other boys around him that are wanting to do something, and then there's going to be your boy, hopefully, that's in the corner that's murmuring to himself, blessed is the man who walks not on the counsel of the wicked, stands in the way of sinners, sits in the seat of mockers, his delight is on the law. In other words, I'm not going to go along with you. Let me give you an example. A number of years ago, Dad came to me, said, my boy's in 7th grade, plays sports, very involved. His friends come over to my house all the time. They know we're going to church. I've started taking them to church. I've created what you would consider a 7th grade boys small group at my house. They all come together. They're eating all my food. They're playing games, swimming, that sort of thing, and they're all coming together, and I need you to come and speak to them. I was like, sure, but why? He said, because I got them all in a circle, and we've started talking, and one night they were all sleeping over, and they were wanting to drink, and I was like, no, we're not going to do that. But I was like, we're going to have a man-to-man talk. What's really going on in your life? And the topic of sex came up. And they said, is it okay to watch pornography? And he said, so what I want you to do is I need you to come to my house where I have them all together. We're going to have a cookout, and you're going to talk to them about masturbation and pornography and sex. I said, easy topic. All right. I said, sure, I'll do it. Absolutely, I'll do it. He's like, because I don't know what to tell them. He said, because ever since they were in 6th grade, they want to have sex. They want to have sex. Biologically, they want to have sex. They feel pent-up frustration. Pornography is very easy, and they're also trying to get other girls to have sex with them in 7th grade and in 6th grade because physically they have the ability to do that. My question is, don't tell them not to do it. My question is, how are you going to tell them and show them how not to do it? How are you going to take a 7th grade boy who God tells him to get married? You're not going to do it in 7th grade, but it's a long window before that young man is going to get married. My dad asked me, why do you want to get married while you're both in school? I said, it's easy. I want to have sex. So what are you going to tell a 7th grader? Seriously, what are you going to tell a 7th grader? And this is what I'm talking about, is that churches would much rather keep talking about Jesus than, and I'm going to say it again, the M word, than masturbation, than pornography, than sex, the urges that they're actually dealing with. Why? Because that makes us uncomfortable. So we're going to take Procrustus's bed and we're going to squeeze you into the mold and we're going to ignore these things. You texting girls to send nude photos and pictures back and forth. And we're going to just talk about Jesus and keep it nice and neat. You think 7th grade and 8th grade right now is like 7th grade and 8th grade when you were in 7th and 8th grade? 5th and 6th grade is now what it's like where it used to be a junior in high school for me. So there's a cry in the church for a generation of young men looking for answers. The best book I've ever found is a book called The 5 Marks of a Man by Brian Tome. This ought to be owned by every single parent at CCV. I don't care if you have a boy or girl. Every single parent needs to read this book now. Brian Tome talks about how the transition to manhood is not marked by age. In other words, once you get to 18 or 25 or 30, you don't become a man. He talks about how some men in their 40s and 50s are still acting like boys. The transition to manhood is not marked by age. It's about your mindset and your actions. It's about assuming responsibility for a place in the world and stepping into a new reality, one defined by strength, purpose, and a code of honor. Okay, so I need someone, because mine fell out. There should be 5 Marks of a Man. I need a bookmark. Can someone grab one back there for me? I'm just going to point. Thank you, Claire. This is Claire. She does our social media. If you like our social media, Claire, wave to everybody. That's Claire. If you don't like our social media, that's Claire. Wave to everybody. Here we go. Brian Tome wrote The 5 Marks of a Man. There are 5 things that mark a man and the transition from boyhood to manhood. We've turned this into a bookmark that I want every single man to take home. And I know you don't like to read. I don't care. You're going to take it home. You're going to put it by your bedside. And you're going to get this book and you're going to read it. The 5 Marks of a Man. Number 1, boys live day to day. Men have a vision for their lives. How many men do you know that live like boys? What's going to happen? Where are you going? What are you doing? I don't know. Kind of hanging. A man lives with purpose, aiming his life towards something bigger than himself. Number 2, boys want the reassurance of the crowd. Men take a minority position. In other words, in any particular room, men or boys look to the crowd and they're like, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. A man says, nah. A man is willing to be unpopular if it means standing for truth and conviction. Does that describe you, or are you easily influenced? I'm not talking about those of you in 7th grade. I'm talking about those of you in your company. That when your church friends aren't around and your wife isn't around and you're on a business trip, that's the real you. That's when the real you comes out. Number 3, boys want everything to revolve around them. Some of you are married to boys right now, and you're 80 years old. Boys want everything to revolve around them. Men are team players. A man sacrifices personal recognition to support, uplift, and win with his team. As Ephesians 5 says, the husband exists to serve and to die for his wife. Number 4, boys play, men work. Right? A man shows up, takes responsibility, and does what needs to be done. Boys, I had a friend one time, lost his job. I said, you have a new job? You've been unemployed for 9 months. He said, the wife just really makes a lot of money, and I'm really taking my time looking. I said, what are you doing? He said, gardening mainly, and I've been teaching myself to cook. In fact, I have some lasagna I want to give you. I said, you don't want to know what I would do with that lasagna if you gave it to me right now. How dare you sit your butt at home while you're sending your wife out to work? Number 5, boys are predators. Men are protectors. A man uses his strength to defend women, guard the vulnerable, and create safety wherever he goes. How many of you are married to a predator? How many of you are dating a predator? Let me tell you what, gals, if you're not married yet and the guy that you're dating is pressuring you to have sex, you are about to marry a predator. He wants to protect you, not get in your pants. And here's the question, church. How are you going to teach 7th grade boys not to do that? Because their group is all doing it. How are we going to teach them, come alongside? Jesus said, go into the world and teach them how to obey. Just don't tell them no, show them how. And so what I want to do with the time that I have remaining, if you're not uncomfortable enough, I'm going to go ahead and answer, how do we make this happen? Now, the Apostle Paul, 2,000 years ago, for those of you who are new, the Apostle Paul, after Jesus died, he was basically one of the key leaders other than Peter and James, his brother. Paul was a missionary and went in different cities and started churches. Here's a map. This is the ancient Greek world. It revolved around the Aegean Sea. When Paul was in probably Athens or Corinth or Ephesus, do you see that tiny island down below where it says the Sea of Crete? That's the island of Crete. The island of Crete, whenever you talk to someone, they're like, yeah, we just went to Greece. I'm like, please tell me you just didn't go to the islands. Yeah, we just went to the island. This is the island no one goes to because it's not exactly that pretty. But this is a place I want you to think of as West Point. Crete, the island of Crete, was the genesis of the ancient Greek Minoan civilization. They were seafaring, or call it buds, essentially. They were seafaring warriors. They eventually became what became called as the Phoenicians, and they ran an empire that went all the way up north to Venice, all the way to Israel, all the way to Spain, all from that little island. And so they were warriors and they were perverts. How did they get to become that way? Because they worshiped a god, and if you can show the picture right here, who is this? Should have a thunderbolt in his hand. This was discovered in the Aegean Sea. That is Zeus. Zeus is the leader of the gods up on top Mount Olympus. Zeus had 23 affairs where he went and proactively seduced women to have sex with him. Why is that important? Because is it the chicken or the egg? did the Minoans, who were warrior perverts, create a god named Zeus because Zeus was created in Crete? Or did Zeus progenerate? As sociologists talk about, we become what we worship, right? You become what you worship. And so, Paul sent a guy named Crete, or a guy named Titus to go to Crete. You can imagine the Apostle Paul is like, who am I going to send to Crete? Am I going to send you? Am I going to send you? Okay, I'm going to send you, right? So this guy, more than likely, jacked, aggressive, he's the guy that you want to send to convert these people. And it says in Titus 1:5, I left you, Titus, in Crete, that you may put in order what was left unfinished, starting with, I want you to ordain pastors in every single one of these churches. The other thing that he wanted to do is, if I can just go there, verse 1:5, finish the unfinished business, appoint elders, encourage them to refute false teachers, and then chapter 2, verse 2, have the older men become temperate, worthy of respect, the older women to teach the young women. Here is how you help a 7th grader deal with these questions. Look on the screen with me. In the Bible, in the church, the way a church is supposed to work is that older men are supposed to be teaching and mentoring younger men. And why is it important that you get younger men or older men with younger men in an obvious safe environment? Why is it important that you do that? Because once you drop an ounce of estrogen into a men's group, men clam up. I love being a part of couples groups, but couples groups will get about this far and stop. Men need an environment where they can be honest and they can be very forthright about what they're struggling with, and they know that these guys are going to take it to the grave for them, right? Every man is looking forward. He's not going to nod. He's not going to do anything right now, but he knows exactly what's going on. Because for every single man that's in this room, there are issues that he never talks about with his wife or mother or sister, ever. Just understand that. That's the truth. It's just the truth. And it's not until you have a safe environment, just like Psalm 1 says, you have a group of people and you have a choice. You can be the one that's mumbling. Blessed is the man who walks on. I'm not going to do this. Blessed is the man. I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to jump in with this. Or they are just forming themselves. Why is it important that you have older men teaching younger men and older women teaching younger women? Because of their life experience, and they've learned how not to do certain things. When our church first started, almost 25 years ago, I had just released a book. I was doing a book tour, basically publishing companies. You know how when they release a movie, then they'll send the people in the movie on the junket tour, right? They're going to all the talk shows and that sort of thing. If you write a Christian book, they send you to all the TV shows that nobody watches, all of the Christian television stations. So they sent me down to Atlanta, and basically I went around to Charles Stanley and all these different programs and stuff. Anyway, 10:35 at night, I walk out of the Atlanta airport. There's a driver that picks me up, and we're going to some suburb. And by the time we get there, it's like 11:15. This is back in the day. There wasn't a lot open. There was like a Circle K or something. And I'm like, I'm starving, but he said, I think that there's a bar in there you can get some food. I just want to pause and say, Lisa always tells me afterwards, you love telling these stories. I didn't even go upstairs. I walked straight into the bar, and I put my bag down, and I ordered some food. And about 10 minutes later, directly across from me, there was a lady who started making eyes, invited me to come over and have a drink with her. And I thought to myself, I've still got it. No. I quickly grabbed my food and I went upstairs and I ate. The next day I called my dad. I said, Dad, man, I'm on planes all the time raising funds for this church, and I got this book going. There's this whole subculture for travel, for people hooking up. I had no idea. Those of you who travel, you know exactly what I'm like. There's this whole subculture, friends with benefits, everything, meeting up. I said, how do you handle this? He said, Brian, I'm going to tell you right now. I learned the first time. You never, ever, ever go down to the bar in a restaurant, ever. He said, you always order up room service, but whatever you do not go down to a bar. Nothing good is going to happen at a bar in a hotel. And that shaped it, right? So if ever I travel, I'm taking food into the hotel room. I'm never going to the bar. Now, why is that important? Because there's a congregation full of young men and older men who need each other. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And there's so much going on in our souls and our hearts that we need each other. And women need each other. Again, I'm not advocating that we create a bunch of Christian jerks. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about creating men and young men and not losing a generation to the world and creating soldiers that are fighting for one another. On Crete, what were they fighting against? Here's what they were fighting against. Here is Zeus. Of course, we grayscaled his girl right there. Zeus was a philanderer, had 23 different affairs. What do you see in all the Greek pottery? Here is Zeus becoming a white goose in order to seduce Leda. That was one of the things he did. Here, Danae, laying on a bed, Zeus becomes a shower of gold, impregnating her. And here is Zeus taking the form of a bull, carrying off Europa to the woods to have sex. If that's what you're worshiping, you're going to do that. Every fall, as long as they keep inviting me to come back, I go down to my alma mater, where I went to undergraduate school. It's Christian college, but they've changed it. They started a football team. They started a football team thinking that it would help with enrollment. And I said, listen, I played football. Your school is not that big. We went Division IV, state championship against Steubenville. Loss. Not a good kick at the end. He said, I get it. If you get a football team for your school, it's going to ruin the school. Have you ever been around 100 aggressive, testosterone-filled, horny men? I said, because that's what you're inviting into your school. So they called me up a few years later and said, we want to hire you to be a professor and to be a football coach. And I said, it happened, didn't it? Yeah, it happened. And I said, I can come and speak in your chapel. So I come and I talk about this in the chapel. School has changed. When you have a chapel service, it used to be like a legit, awesome worship service where there were real Christians that were showing up that wanted to have God work in their lives. This time now, this school has become a school of pagans, and when I speak in chapel, I get heckled, and I love it. I'm talking back and forth with these people, and I'm talking about nothing that a bikini covers is a man allowed to touch. I talked to the young women about not letting young men use them for their bodies. I talked about self-control. I talked about all of these things. And you want to know the faces that were forlorn and hurt the most. It was all the young women in the chapel service realizing what is being done to them by 21st century men claiming to follow Jesus but following Zeus. And what I want to do is I want to change that. I don't want to have an area, a facility, a congregation, a culture of judgment Forget where you've been. Forget everything that you've done. Here is what I want to see happen this fall. Before I get to that, I want to read to you something. Here's someone you should follow on Instagram, John Delaney. He's a Christian psychologist. He said this. Your teenager might be wise, and they might be mature beyond their years, but they're still a teenager. And when you hand them full access to social media, Snapchat, and the unfettered internet, you're not just handing them a phone, you're putting them in a war. A war between your child's developing brain and billions of dollars in design, research, and algorithms created by trained professionals who want one thing: your child's attention. No teenager is equipped to win that battle. Here's what I would like to see this fall. I am going to initiate this fall the 5 marks of a man groups. Now I'm going to ask men, hitting groups of 5, 6, 7 men, max. And I'm asking every single man in CCV that's 7th grade and older to be a part of these groups. Obviously, for the students, student ministry is obviously going to vet, and they're going to check, and they're going to facilitate all of that. So these are very safe people with relational leaders that are already there, so you don't have to worry about that. But every single man in the church, 7th grade and older, and in biblical terms, a 7th grader, if they biologically have the features of a man, they're a man. And we're going to put every single man in this church into a group where it's going to become a band of brothers. It's going to become a group where we're going to meet together. We're going to read this book. We're going to vow secrecy for one another. We're going to take secrets to the grave, and we're going to become real. You know how when you get involved in a church, and you'll be involved in a church for years, and you will never share what's actually going on? We're not going to do that anymore. We're also going to launch a corollary study for women to do the exact same thing. So this fall is going to be different. We're going to have men meeting with men. We're going to have women meeting with women. We're going to ask God to do something special. Does anybody right now know the true condition of your soul? Who do you entrust to share this very vulnerable aspect of who you are? You need someone who's going to be there for you. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for giving us just unvarnished truth. How blessed is the man who doesn't go along with his buddies and do stupid things, but they choose to be guided by Torah Yahweh, the words of Yahweh. Because the person that does that will be like a tree that is planted by streams of living water, which yields its fruit in season and whose leaves does not wither. Whatever that man does prospers. Help us not to lose a generation of young men. Help us not to lose a generation of older men who have the wisdom and the tenacity to be able to help others. God, thank you so much for the Christian fathers and husbands and Christian men that are here. We need each other. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for watching today's message. Make sure to check out Brian's new book, Finding Favor, God's Blessings Beyond Health, Wealth, and Happiness. To sign up for Brian's newsletter, please go to Brian's website at brianjones.com.